Now we will discuss some current approaches for investigating bias. Studying bias in adaptive educational systems is not a new topic. There have primarily been two ways of investigating bias. First, the earlier studies where it was more common to study the biased effectiveness of the adaptive system as a whole, and then the more recent studies that have focused mainly on the algorithmic models. Among the earlier studies of bias, a few studies have examined the demographic differences in the effectiveness of system design. Arroyo and colleagues observed that using female characters as pedagogical agents was beneficial for female students, while male students exhibited worse outcomes in the presence of female characters in terms of both learning and affective experience. Wolf and colleagues report that affective feedback delivered by the pedagogical agents was more effective for students with learning disabilities. A couple of studies have explored cultural mismatches in student behaviors and classroom practices as possible explanations for demographic differences. Ogun and colleagues reported the collaborative use of an adaptive system in Latin American and Asian countries that was developed in the US for individual use. Rodrigo and colleagues reported consistently less off-task behavior in students in the Philippines. A few non-empirical papers have discussed how research methods may lead to biases in adaptive systems. Andres and colleagues highlight the disconnect in implementing methods developed in the Western context to a low-income global South country. Blanchard talks about the differing needs of students across the globe and the limited cultural diversity in the student population investigated in our empirical work. Lastly, a couple of studies have experimented with overcoming bias by adapting design to students' needs. For example, Finkelstein reported better performance of third graders in science when the adaptive system used a similar dialect as the native tongue of the students, in this case, African American Vernacular English. More recently, investigation on bias has focused mainly on the algorithmic models, particularly the downstream stages of predictive modeling. Most of these studies have focused on race, gender, and nationality as the demographic categories. The results reveals that it is likely problematic to assume population validity in algorithmic systems. Many of these studies are discussed in the Baker and Horn article that you read this week. A limited number of studies have investigated other demographic categories other than race, gender, and nationality. However, within these studies, these are also not without the limitations that are commonly seen in such studies. This includes lack of studies on non-binary gender identities and indigenous students, maybe oversimplified categorizations, such as of that of race, for instance, and also a lack of voice from non-US research groups. I would like you all to pause here and think about some of these empirical evidences that we discussed on algorithmic bias, and think of potential ways in which you would be auditing the example models that you specified earlier. How would you audit these models for bias? More importantly, what are some limitations and challenges in auditing your example models for bias? And again, try to be as specific as you can.